Do you believe walls can remember? That the spaces we call home can hold on to something darker, something alive? It started on a rainy October evening. Claire and her husband Jason had just moved into an old Victorian house. The house had stood for over a century, its walls weathered by time and secrets. They got it for a bargain, an estate sale from a distant family member they'd never met. Claire had felt uneasy about the move, but Jason dismissed her nerves as stress. "It's just an old house," he'd said. "Nothing to worry about." But even as they unpacked, strange things began to happen. The first was the smell. It wasn't consistent, just fleeting whiffs of decay, like something rotting deep within the walls. They'd scrubbed, aired out the house, even called a plumber, but the source was never found. Then came the noises. At first, just faint scratching in the walls. Jason thought it was mice. Claire wasn't so sure. The sound wasn't random. It came at the same time every night, 2:03 a.m. Exactly, and then there was the mirror. In the master bedroom hung an antique mirror, its silver frame tarnished and pitted with age. Jason loved it, but Claire hated it. It gave her the feeling of being watched, as though the reflection wasn't just mimicking her movements, but studying her. A week after moving in, Claire decided to explore the attic. She hadn't gone up there yet, but she'd been hearing faint footsteps overhead, and curiosity, or dread, finally got the better of her. The attic was colder than the rest of the house, despite the insulation. Dust floated in the dim light of her flashlight, and the air smelled faintly of mildew. She found an old trunk shoved against the far wall. Its leather straps were brittle, the metal locks rusted. Inside were the usual things: yellowed newspapers, moth-eaten clothes, and a few water-stained photographs of somber-looking people. But at the very bottom, she found something that sent a chill down her spine. It was a diary, bound in cracked black leather. The entries were written in cramped, spidery handwriting, detailing the life of a woman named Margaret, who had lived in the house in the early 1900s. Margaret had written about hearing whispers in the walls, about seeing her reflection in mirrors move when she hadn't. The final entry read, "They said it was grief. They said it was in my head, but it's not. I see them. I hear them. And now they're in me." The page was smeared with what looked like dried blood. Claire tried to show the diary to Jason, but when she went back to the attic, the trunk was gone. At first, Jason thought she was imagining things. Maybe the house was getting to her. But then he started noticing the whispers. They weren't words exactly, just faint, raspy murmurs, like someone was trying to speak from behind the walls. They grew louder at night, circling the room, sometimes even seeming to laugh. One evening, as they sat in the living room, the electricity flickered, and Jason joked, "Looks like the ghosts don't like us." But the laugh that followed didn't come from either of them. It came from the walls. Claire decided she couldn't take it anymore. She wanted to leave, but Jason insisted they stay. "This house is ours now," he said. "We can't just give up." But the house didn't feel like it belonged to them. That night, Claire woke to a sound, a soft tapping. She looked at the clock, 2:03 a.m. She turned toward the antique mirror, and her breath caught in her throat. Her reflection wasn't moving. She raised her hand, and the woman in the mirror just stared at her, unblinking, her lips curling into a crooked smile. Then, the reflection moved toward her, pressing its hands against the glass, as though trying to break through. The mirror cracked, a web of fractures spreading across its surface, and Claire screamed. Jason finally believed her after that night. He'd heard the whispers, seen the reflection. They decided to leave the house immediately, abandoning most of their belongings. But as they drove away, Claire glanced back at the house one last time, and she saw it. In the attic window stood a figure, a woman in a black dress, her face pale and expressionless. She watched them drive away, her head slowly tilting to one side. Claire and Jason never went back. They moved across the country into a bright modern apartment. They told themselves it was over, that they were safe. But sometimes, late at night, Claire swears she can still hear whispers, and every so often, in the corner of her eye, she catches a glimpse of that crooked smile in the mirror. Because some houses don't just hold memories. So next time you see a house that feels too quiet, too still, remember this: some walls hold more than plaster and paint, and some things, once invited, never truly leave.